BTR's Elite Partners podcast and blog series, where we invite our elite partners to share what they're doing with technology and benefits. My name is Holly Brummett. I am co-host of the series, as well as the business development coordinator for BTR. And with me is my other co-host, Therese Tomasek. Hey, Therese.
Hey, Holly, thanks. Like Holly mentioned, I'm Therese Tomasek. I am the consulting operations and vendor manager for BTR. And we're just really excited to bring awareness to the market about our elite carrier and vendor partners.
Yeah, we are. You know, we've been referred to as the gold standard for HR technology and communications, and our partners are just the same. They're gold too. They're solid gold. So our elite partnerships are key to employers' success and savings, and we're really excited to share about them.
They really are one of the key employer success and savings. I'd also like to add that we created these partnerships to really help employees, understand HR technology and employee benefits because they can oftentimes be extremely complicated. And at BTR, we really aim to not only simplify the experience, but also improve it with creative and customized solutions for employers everywhere. And today we are very proud of the Elite Partners Program, and we're proud to feature Proliant on the podcast.
Awesome. Well, let's get into the conversation with the guys. We had Tim and Adam on from Proliant, and we had a great conversation about all of the things that they're doing over there. It's really exciting.
Right. Good afternoon, everyone. Today on the podcast, we have with us Tim Clark and Adam Clayton from Proliant. So will you please both introduce yourselves and what you do?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having us. My name is Tim Clark. I am the National Enterprise Sales Manager for Proliant. I've been with Proliant about 14 years now, so seen a pretty significant amount of growth here. But essentially, I'm a consultant, and enterprise doesn't necessarily dictate a group size that I focus with or on, but really work with a lot of strategic partnerships on the broker side and on the technology side as well.
And hello, my name is Adam Clayton. My title is Chief Financial Officer here at Proliant. I've been here for about 7 years now. Before Proliant, I worked for Ernst & Young in a myriad of capacities, but at Proliant, head of the finance organization, risk organization, as well as kind of help our product roadmap and security offerings there too. So thanks for having me on board today.
All right, terrific. Yeah, thank you both so much for sharing. We're happy to have you on today. One of the things BTR gets a lot of questions about over and over again is, what are your partners really good at? So if you wouldn't mind, would you please share what Proliant is really good at and kind of what's your claim to fame?
Sure, absolutely. One thing we do at Proliant, we firmly take the approach that there is no best HR technology that's out there, but more importantly, who's the best fit for the client. So we do just as much an evaluation of them that they're doing of us when we get the opportunity to participate in their vendor evaluation. And to kind of give you a little background on how we got into this industry, Adam and I are actually joining you from our corporate office in Atlanta. But about 34 years ago, our CEO is a former Ernst & Winnie CPA, which dates him pretty significantly and doesn't like us saying that, but he started his own CPA firm here in Atlanta, and like most CPAs, wanted nothing to do with payroll. I kept getting asked that question from clients saying, hey, you do all this tax work and this reporting, can you help us with payroll? And the answer was no, that's not what we did. But after about 6 or 7 years of constantly being asked that question, we kind of took a step back and said, all right, what exactly is your payroll provider doing for you? Because all we're doing is fixing and advising on their tax filing issues. So about 28 years ago, we migrated over to become a payroll service bureau. And at that point in time, obviously, the landscape of HR technology was significantly different as it is now. It was payroll and timekeeping. But we really saw some needs that needed to be filled there. So we moved over to become a service bureau. And the rest has really grown organically in the exact same way that we got into payroll, which is clients reaching out saying, hey, help us with payroll. Can you help us with benefits? Can you help us with ACA or onboarding? So that's a really long lead up to really say that payroll is essentially our system of record. So our clients have the opportunity to pick and choose from the solutions that we offer that make the most sense for their organization. They can implement them at any point in time or even remove them as they see fit provided that payroll's in place. That's that one required service that we have. So I think when you look at kind of ourselves and our competitors, everybody's got a strength and a weakness. Ours really stems from payroll. So with multi-state, multi-jurisdictional tax filing, multi-EIN, general ledgers, we do a lot in the variable hour market. So not necessarily industry specific. You look at those industries that have a lot of attrition, a lot of turnover, a lot of part-time and variable hour employees. So it's manufacturing, restaurants, hospitality, long-term care, nursing. So we do a lot in those spaces, and it's not to say that we don't do anything in the white collar space, because we do a good bit there as well. But we've just made a lot of advancements and offer a lot of tools that really cater to those groups that have a lot of moving parts in that hourly in those hourly industries.
Thanks for sharing about that, Tim. You know, that's really interesting how you kind of had your thing that you were doing, right? And then somebody's like knocking at the door, hey, payroll. Hey, what about payroll? Hey, payroll. We see a lot of the same thing in the market too. Can you talk a little bit more about, you know, you've got your payroll central service. What are some of the common services that you see built around that payroll, and where are you finding a lot of success for your clientele?
Well, the main services, you know, today that really kind of essentially are included with payroll. They're usually not, you know, buying just payroll. They're also getting onboarding is always one that comes. ACA is always one that comes. We were actually the first in the industry to have an integrated ACA suite within our payroll module. And again, has a lot of bells and whistles that cater to those variable hour markets that struggle with turnover and ACA.
Yeah.
The HRIS, time and labor, those are always going to be the core services. It's changed a little bit. I mean, obviously coming out of the pandemic, I think groups in our industry always tend to get a little bit wide in good times. And then when something like a pandemic or a recession hits, a lot of those ancillary outlying products are usually the first to get removed. And it comes back to the blocking and tackling, which is payroll, timekeeping, and really the compliance pieces like I-9 compliance on the front end with onboarding, and then obviously ACA and keeping time. Benefits is always one. It's not necessarily one that they use us for. So we're kind of with Ben Admin, we've got a Ben Admin solution that we can offer, but we also integrate with a lot of best in breed Ben Admin solutions that our broker partners are utilizing. So whether it's Employee Navigator or PlanSource or bSwift or Celerix or Bernie Portal, you know, we've got a handful that are really more broker sponsored that we have integrations with, which I think in this day and age, being able to be flexible enough to integrate with best in breed solutions is a really key component of an offering, right? So
Right.
The all-in-one solution, not any one provider can be the best in everything. So, you know, chances are if you've got, you know, really complex time and labor needs and union rules, things like that, chances are that provider may not necessarily have a very strong Ben Admin solution. Not to say that that's always the case, but so there's always these standalone kind of best in breed. So as long as groups have those in place, we're open to work with them and create integrations there.
And that's where you can work with partners like BTR
That's
to build
right.
out your Ben Admin. I've built some of those Proliant connections on bSwift and Employee Navigator,
That's right.
and worked on coding for that. So, you know, it's really been awesome to have good partners in the market like Proliant. And as well as, you know, we've got iBenefit communication in our pocket as well. I think that that's really awesome when you can put those three components together. You've got a really nice system for your employees.
Absolutely.
And for your HR staff.
Well, again, there's no one size fits all, right? So
Right.
You know, we see it, to tell you the truth, talking kind of going back to products, you know, I had mentioned onboarding. You know, in the past, if you wanted to get a good onboarding solution, you always had to get applicant tracking. Those always lived together. But we approach that a little bit differently because applicant tracking is very much a candidate experience, where onboarding is the beginning of the employee experience, which from a compliance perspective, you know, I-9s, W-4s, state forms, those are really all tied to a tax engine. So, which is why our onboarding is an element of payroll. Applicant tracking if you look at the entire kind of hire to retire landscape of technology, applicant tracking is very much one of those products that we see so many standalone products that groups want to integrate with, maybe whether they're industry specific, so they purchase this, or maybe they're part of a larger organization that mandates they use this because all their hiring goes through this initiative, which is completely fine. Changing an applicant tracking system should never be part of having to change payroll. So we see that applicant tracking suite unbundled more than any of them, because groups already have a solution in place that they don't want to, they may have captured thousands of requisitions and applications over the years. They don't want to change that, which is fine, because it's really just some basic information that's being passed to kick off the onboarding piece. So that's, one of those pieces that we generally see, again, is that service that a lot of times gets disconnected from the entire life cycle because it already exists in some other capacity for the client.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. In some respects, and Trees, you may be able to talk a little bit more to this because I don't have much experience with applicant tracking, but it seems like that would be an easier system to maybe build out for the front end experience. Would you agree?
Applicant tracking is super important. I know, technology has already transformed the entire recruitment life cycle, right? Everything's digitized, resumes, interviews. You want to make sure that the candidate experience really starts from the interface that you're using, so they have a seamless experience when not only looking for jobs and searching for them, but also when they're inputting in their personal information, resume parsing, things like that. It starts with that first click by that candidate.
Yeah, and definitely not discounting the importance of applicant tracking by any means, because obviously the world in which we live right now, obviously everyone's looking for qualified people. But just, from a technology piece, they usually, once that's built out and that process, that culture, that experience for that organization is put in place from a candidate experience, they usually just want to kind of keep it there.
Right.
And truth be told, like I said, there's minimal information that gets passed over, so you can put a requisition out there and have 500 people apply to it. You're only hiring one or two of them. So those are the ones that actually transition to become an employee and then kick over into onboarding. So there's some basic information that needs to kind of pass over. So that's why they're usually kind of somewhat separate there.
Right.
Yeah, just to kind of piggyback, and I think that's kind of a larger theme where just an applicant tracking system, like for instance, there is an applicant tracking system that's just specific to trucking industries. There's an applicant tracking system that's specific to long-term care facilities, and it goes into the credentials that are involved. It goes into the background checks that are involved. There's so many different nuances between the employer size, industry, geographies, is that if you're not specific, you're too general. You're not good enough for certain people because they're not drilling down to solve the immediate problems of the organization. So, but to Tim's point, like that differentiation comes in applicant tracking, comes in, especially in time and labor is another great example. It comes in a myriad of different solutions. So kind of how we go back to the original question of how we kind of go to market, how do we, differentiate, is that we can differentiate. It's almost like building blocks of that perfect sort of ecosystem that you need to survive and really excel as an organization.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. That's a really key point. Specificity is really important to some people, and it has to be. So that's really awesome that you guys can offer that. Can you talk? We've talked a little bit about your core service, your core product, and then some of the things that go wrong along with that. Can you talk a little bit more about integration and how you're seeing some of those products integrated? Where are you finding most of your APIs? How successful are EDIs in some of those areas? That kind of thing.
Yeah, I can probably take that one. So on the integration side, so we have an open API architecture, and it's funny. I think people throw around that term. You should integrate everything via API, and you're set and done. And quite frankly, it really gets down to the use case that's involved, and that's what I have to reiterate a lot with our not our sales team or operations teams, is that really if everything needs to be done transactionally between two different softwares, that's wholly warrants using an API to do that, right? So we see that like on the onboarding side, right? So in an applicant tracking system, hey, I want to hire this person, they need to go immediately through the onboarding process. That doesn't need to wait a day. I mean, some of these, especially in Tim's, what he said earlier, just in our kind of expertise in the blue collar vertical, like they're hiring tons of people every day. This is not just like, hey, I hire one person every 3 months. This is, I got to push through like 30 people today, depending on the size of the organization. So that, and a lot of times would facilitate an API integration, just an applicant tracking. Time and labor may be a little bit different, right? I'm only doing time cards or paying payroll with hours every 2 weeks. Do I really need an API or that, or I'd rather just get a file-based integration where I can review the time that's coming over, spend some time looking at it, and then dump a file into the system, and that can be done via SFTP, EDI, all the rest of them. So kind of when you're looking at these kind of best of breed solutions, we are faced with that kind of what's the optimal use case here. And I think it's really both vendors coming in and really having the mindset of, hey, let's solve client problems and not just, beat our chest, like who's going to be the bigger person in this room, is really saying like, how are we going to solve this problem for the client? And then let's figure out those specific use cases. And then, when both parties are aligned, it usually it's a pretty quick once that happens. But yeah, so it's, we're seeing applicant tracking systems, learning management systems. We're seeing a lot of integrations there. I'll be honest, one of the ones we've come across last 6 months that I think will be continuing is on the security side, which is single sign-on, ADFS sort of integrations. They want, MFA, DFA sort of integrations, making sure that there's more secure interactions when they come into the system. So we'll see a lot more of that. I guarantee over the next couple of years, just as cyber fraud picks up. So a lot of different applications, and so that I'm probably talking about right now.
Yeah, we see the MFA starting to climb up from our experience too. Multi-factor authentication, for people who aren't familiar with MFA. It's a way to have 2 security checkpoints before you get into a system. And it's been really interesting to watch how that's developing. We use it all the time on most of our applications here, internally, and I'm sure you guys do too. Can you talk a little bit more about what you're seeing, maybe as a market growth, or even what's on your roadmap, as far as, where Proliant is going to be in the future, as far as some of that stuff?
Yeah, so where we're going from a roadmap perspective, I think the most key thing that we focus on is we focus on what clients are asking for and what our prospects are asking for. I think our product team does a great job of sitting back and listening, as opposed to dictating what needs to be done. And so so what we do there is we reach out to a lot of partners like you guys, and we have touch points to say, what are you hearing from the industry? What are clients asking for? What are the pain points? And I think us know where we sit in the verticals that we do sit in. Like for instance, we have a good practice, like restaurant practice. So hey, what are some point of sale integrations that we can make our lives better for our clients? And I think one of the key points that we harp on a lot internally, and I think this goes from integration point of view and really just kind of holistically speaking, is we want to automate as much as we can for our clients, right? So if they have 2 points of entry, let's make it 1 and figure out which one that needs to be, and then figure out what the downstream systems need to be. If there are, and it's shocking we're here in 2022 talking about getting rid of paper processes. Like, let's get rid of anything you have on paper, get rid of it, get it online.
Oh yeah.
And another thing that we talk about a lot in turn that kind of goes hand in hand with just the automation and just sort of maybe moving everything to the cloud is standardization of data. And I think that's one that people really miss out on, in the fact that an employee is, this employee in system A is the same employee in system B, which is the same employee in system C. And the reason that's really important is because almost every sort of organization is doing big data analysis on every facet of their organization. So when you think about any of these sort of big BI concepts, they want to have everything standardized, because they're joining data from 6, 7, 8 different systems at once to make sure, where can I be more efficient within our organization? And HR is just one facet of the organization, but in other labor intensive industries, that's a huge component of cost. So they're looking at their CRM data, their HR data, their ERP data, and they're saying, I need to have my employees and my data all seamless across the same thing, because when I aggregate that all up, I can start to pick trends and see where I'm hitting the mark, where I'm missing the mark, and really make operational improvements. So, that's kind of how we think of it, is like, the more we can automate it, the more we can standardize it, the more we can make all these transactions secure, the better business partners we are with our clients.
Absolutely.
And better utilization by the employee themselves, right? So I think,
Right.
and I had the opportunity to speak at a conference with a couple of your BTR coworkers about employee engagement, and that's kind of the big buzzword these days. Is, we get asked all the time, do you have an employee engagement? It's like, well, what is that? I always ask that back because it means something different to everyone, right? Some are looking at it and saying employee engagement is the ability for surveys. But for some, like in the blue collar space, it's the ability for an employee to take the onus to swap a shift or to be able to update demographic information. It really depends on the capacity of where they are now. But really being able to make sure that the overall employee experience is simplistic. So regardless of the services that they're utilizing, benefits, time and labor, performance management, it's such an easy way for the employee to engage, kind of help remove some of the HR from having to actually be the one that's doing the data entry and teaching the employees. They put it on them so they can kind of get to, some of the additional pieces like Adam talked about, which is, how to use the data, how to better the workforce, how to do some of the other things from a business perspective that they need. And so we do a lot with the engagement side of things by really just saying, okay, let's talk about what that means to you and figure out from a fluidity perspective, if this is your process, how to make this easy for your employees to engage and live within the system full time.
Right. And just, to piggyback off of that, this is helping employees have better control over their data, their benefits, their tasks, but while also giving companies, more effective tools to evaluate their engagement and their productivity.
That's right.
Yeah, we hear all the time, data is king. We scrub data, we audit data, we check data, we manipulate data, we do so many things in this industry to make data tell the story that we want it to tell and the story that we really need it to tell. And that is so true. Data is really king in a lot of what we have going on. Yeah. Yeah. What else is big and exciting for Proliant?
Well, I think we've got, I'll let Adam talk about, some additional roadmap things. I think a lot of things that we're working on right now. I mean, like he had mentioned, obviously a lot of our development and roadmap comes from what our clients are asking for. And obviously some of those lifts are a lot bigger and harder to do and take longer development than some of the smaller ones. So we're always kind of chipping away at some of these little pieces and constantly making new updates. So we're always adding some of the additional, engagement tools that we talked about and making it easier for the employee to live in there. And every day there's something that comes along that makes it, and even when I log into the system, whether it be from a reporting perspective, I'm just like, wow, this is great. I knew that this was coming, but it's actually out here. So now we can start working it. So there's always a lot of little nuance that's coming, which seems almost every other day or so. But some of the bigger lifts, Adam, I'll let you I know you sit on that product team, you can talk about some of those other pieces that are coming down the line.
Yeah, sure. So I think one of the ones we've been working on, and it's been a number of years in the making, is a more trying to call it a more kind of living, breathing performance or position management system. And I think that's something we've worked on for a number of years. And the fact that I think a lot of ones that we've seen in the industry are really more like the kind of set it and forget it sort of ones, where it's, hey, I got 50 employees and here's their position hierarchy, and I'm gonna let someone in HR just manage this from now on. So, and I think and they're all very good. They're very deep structures that we've looked at in the industry, but the one thing is they don't live and breathe with the organization. I think blue collar is a really good example, right? So if I have 100 employees in my organization and I set that budget up at one time, that could change next Tuesday. I mean, you don't know how many hours are being worked in different capacities by different positions. So, and really, you don't know what your hiring needs look like unless you have that sort of rear view mirror of data that you're looking at. So one things that we're working on with, and we'll be out here shortly, is that position management structure that is really showing you, here's how you think people are working in their positions, here's how they are actually working in their positions. So having that be one of them in kind of a living, breathing module where that position management structure is kind of it's governing security, it's governing an ATS system, it's governing almost how time and labor time is being recorded. So that's a big item for us. Kind of piggybacking on top of that is more of a compensation management, budgeting management system as well, right? So, it's hard to hire people. Well, one thing people don't talk about, but anybody who is upward management of a company knows, is how do you retain people better? So it's finding people. I know that's always been tough, but how do I consistently evaluate the employees I have, make sure that my organization is paying them what they should be paying for the tasks that they're performing on hand. So we have some compensation management modules that are out there doing just that. Like, they're looking at the tasks they're performing, the pay equity structure they have within the organization, making sure that, hey, this person is a good person and we're paying them enough, they're paying them adequately for the work they're performing. I think another one, kind of piggybacking on Tim, not only the employee experience, one thing that we're also focused on is the managerial experience. So not the administrative experience, not the person that's operating the software, but really that middle tier of the organization. I think that's been a key want that we've heard from clients over the years that we've really taken to heart. But it's really kind of, how do I, as a manager, manage my employees more effectively? It's one thing that we all talk about, theoretically, how there's some BI quants looking at big data and saying, here's all your discrepancies. It's another thing for a manager of, let's say, 10 to 15 employees, and saying, how do I get the data on these 10 to 15 employees that I'm kind of working with on a day-by-day basis, and how do I make sure their compensation's right? How do I make sure their experience is going well with the organization? How do I make sure I'm getting the most out of these employees that I can, and kind of judging their sentiment of our organization? So really kind of focusing on the manager itself and saying, how do they operate? So there's a number of tools that we're coming out with that are kind of piggybacking on other modules we have, but it's really kind of, like I said, it's changing the paradigm in terms of how those modules operate, not just with the employee and the admin, but really how does that middle tier work with all of these components as well.
Yeah, that's a really key development. I like that, because those managers, they aren't getting usually the same kind of college experience that an HR person has. They don't have the technology training that an HR person has. They don't. They typically struggle with technology just a little bit more, and that's not an unfair assessment. That's just the way we see it on our side. And to give them the tools that they need, and to be able to make it accessible and to make it digestible and all that stuff, that's really going to be a key thing for you, to have that available for like the middle management scenario like you're talking about. That's a cool thing.
Well, I think it also comes down, obviously, to flexibility. Most systems are going to have a managerial level of access, but sometimes when it's just a strict role-based, it doesn't really allow for nuance there, because maybe I'm a frontline manager, but there's also Adam's role, which Adam isn't an admin or a manager. He's kind of floating in between that. So you can create a specific role and have the flexibility enough to create a specific role for Adam to do what they need for them to do in the organization. We're finding that more and more, that there isn't employee, manager, admin. There's a lot more moving parts in there in these organizations where people are doing kind of a hybrid role. So, okay, so how do we make sure the security is in place to really allow them to do this, but more importantly, give them additional tools that they need to thrive at that role as well and get the most out of their employees. So really being able to kind of widen the array of opportunity or access to technology, really, as a manager, to create it for a Holly role, right? In specific, this role doesn't exist for anybody else but you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, anything else you want to share during our time together today, guys?
I don't have any. We just certainly appreciate the partnership, and more importantly, the opportunity today to get together and kind of talk through this. And obviously, we're always here as an extension. So if people have any questions, we're here to help answer them. See how we help however we can.
Agreed. Yeah. Appreciate all the time, and thank you for inviting us to this. I think it's been a great discussion.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Tim, and thank you, Adam from Proliant, for joining us for the Elite Partners podcast series. And we really appreciate your partnership. It's valuable to us and to our clients. So we just are really excited that you guys are part of the team.
Thank you
Now
very
to the
much.
listener of this podcast, if you are an employer looking for an HR technology solution, whether it be payroll, ben admin, time and attendance, HRS, HCM, or whatever, or even year-round one-on-one enrollment support, we have solutions that will fit your culture as well as your budget. So our elite partners are making a difference and we're here for it. If you'd like more information about the information you heard detailed today, reach out to us at btrprojects@bentechre.com to connect with our experts. Thanks for viewing today's podcast and enjoy your day.